outrageous, though. Ay, ay, ay.
Whoa.
Wait.
Whoa. Okay, they're really going off right now.
Yes, it's a little bigger now. What time is it there? Midnight?
Oh boy, it is exactly midnight. And happy Lunar New Year for anyone celebrating.
Lunar New Year. What's up, Adrian? Happy Lunar New Year. I know that's
oh my gosh, it is so loud.
I mean, I can hear a little bit of tippy tappies. What's up, Royal Aid? Right. Man, we got people here right when it starts. That's nice. That's a nice feeling. Thank y'all for showing up. They leave the chat immediately. All right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go on mute for like 1 second and hope this improves. But yeah,
it's truly not that bad coming through. I know it sounds bad for you. Let's just roll.
Oh, okay. All right. And well, today we're going to talk about status, and you know what else is lying around in my brother's room besides?
Are you in your brother's childhood room? Knuckles?
Yes, I'm doing the baby sister thing where I rummage through every single thing in his room.
That's so funny.
Did you ever do that growing up? Like rummage through your room of your sibling to be like, ooh, what else is in here?
Well, I've never been a baby sister. But no, I'm not like a.
Because you're the oldest, right?
I'm the oldest.
Oh, you got rummaged.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. My siblings and I never really had that kind of relationship. My little brother. Yeah, like I would say we're not really that close. Like we obviously care about each other, see each other at the holidays, but like we're all kind of, or me and my brother are surprise, like loner archetypes. And we would like play video games or whatever. And like he moved out to like middle of nowhere Texas. Now he's in like quasi middle of nowhere Colorado. Doxing him. What's up, Zubret? And then my little sister, she stayed in Georgia, and so she's very close to my parents. And so like we just all kind of did our own thing. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I in my rummaging, I found this one of the ultimate symbols of status. Do you know what this box is?
No, it looks like a tissue box, but fancy, or a jewelry box or something.
It's a Rolex box.
Oh, all right.
But yeah,
okay.
Like, it's a thing, right? Like it's kind of like the workwear guy and then like Rolex guy on Twitter was a thing.
I'm just so not a watch guy. What's the best food in 2025? I mean, like the year just started, but I would say Taco Bell's always a strong classic favorite for me. Kristen, do you eat much fast food?
I've been much better about it. I used to a lot because like when we go hiking and stuff, we drive in the middle of the night and nothing else is open. So like I've been through my whole ringer of like In-N-Out and like McDonald's and whatnot.
You mean much better about eating more fast food, right?
No. No, I'm getting to the age where it hurts my tummy, which you will understand in a few years.
Kristen, I already understand. I'm just a warrior and I fight through the pain.
Okay.
No, like my go-to is like I still get a Big Mac, no pickles, like I did the other night when I was very hungry. Yeah, I live my aesthetic, Kristen.
No,
yeah,
I mean, to dox you a tiny bit based on his state, which is not so bad. I was like, oh, yeah, you were being Florida man, eating Big Mac in the middle of the night.
I mean, okay, so I did the thing where, like, when you have a meal out and you're like, oh, I'm not going to take these leftovers. I'm not going to want them later or whatever. I wanted them later and I regretted it. That like at 11 o'clock at night that I didn't save my breakfast leftovers to eat in the middle of the night. And that's why I needed to get that food.
Oh, so your go-to order is Big Mac with extra pickles?
No pickles. Pickles are
no pickles.
a waste of vinegar.
What?
I don't like pickles. I think they're not very good. They kind of taste like urine to me, but is what it is.
You're missing out on an entire fun food group.
I mean, I don't want to yuck your yum. I just never liked them.
Oh.
Do money and status always go together?
We're turning into those chaotic podcasts where the host just like rapidly switches from pickles to
Look, if we're not If we're not making people feel whiplash, I don't even know what we're doing.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to let you know that the chat is on my side.
I like kimchi. I don't dislike pickled things. I specifically dislike pickled cucumbers, I guess, which is just pickles. Okay. Royal Aid canonically loves urine, loves to eat urine. That's just how it goes. I'm gonna
put this on the screen so that we can have a record of this forever.
Immediately blacklisted into a weird BDSM channel. Yeah. All right, what's up, Sam?
So your question about money and status, do they always go together? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah. We'll start there.
I think we're here to explore the edges where they are not so tied. I think that's where it's interesting to me.
So the answer is no.
Not 100%, which is not a very fun answer.
Actually, they're not. Yeah, no, I agree though. I mean, that's why I asked it that way, because I wanted to talk about that.
Well, let's talk about like when it is tied, right? Like that's for the most part where people associate status. It's like, it's a way for you to show off your wealth, right? Because there's no point in having money if you can't show it off in general society, and status is one of the ways you would show it off. It's like, I don't want to explicitly say that I have more money than you. I want to imply that I have more money and power than you.
So in that framing, status follows money.
Yes, or power. And then power is not necessarily the most money.
I mean, sure. But the most power isn't necessarily the most status either. Like, there's plenty of really powerful people throughout history that were like fully unknown.
True. And some people like hide their power, so it's not so obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a little triangle thing going on, I think. Money,
status,
power. Status. Yeah.
And maybe like a weird secret fourth point, self-fulfillment.
Self-actualization. Yeah. But I think from like, especially people who would watch the show, like we'd like to not pretend, but like not acknowledge the ways that these items influence us to some extent.
Say more.
Well, I think it's both. Maybe it's both. It's like we're hyper aware, but we also are trying to be above it.
Who's we?
People who watch the show.
Like the royal we. Got it.
Yeah. Which includes royal today.
Interesting. Power badge only matters. Power badge is dead. Long live the power badge. Kristen, you wanted to talk about this, and I thought it was a good idea. What did you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about how I always felt very uncomfortable with status, because I see it as a farce, right? It's like it's a artificial construct we have created as a society to delineate people, right? Like there's different types of status, and then oftentimes we're implicitly trying to gain more of it, because it is unfortunately a tool that's really tied in with like other things we need. Like, in order to have money, oftentimes you play around with status or the idea of status so that you can do marketing stuff or like, ways to draw attention. And, by the virtue of us trying to, do this stuff on the internet, we're trying to like gain status in a way. So it's like an unescapable force that I think is really dark. Like,
okay.
Right. Sorry, the fireworks are like so loud I can barely hear you. So you're gonna have to enunciate.
I'll speak a little more enunciatorily so that you can pick up what I'm putting down. Okay, so there's a couple things that I think I disagree with. I don't think status is an artificial construct. I think status is a default state of perception by people. And I think that like all thought go ahead.
You can't have status if there is nothing to compare, right?
I agree with
one
that,
has to be better than the other. Like
Yes.
you can be better if there's no one no metric to compare against.
Yeah, but just because a concept requires like an other doesn't mean it's artificial. Unless you're a pure solipsist, like we've talked about before, which I like to jokingly say that I am. Like
Yes.
if the self is all that exists, then nothing else matters. Sure, I buy that. Ooh, sure, I buy that.
Oh, the camera went off early today.
Yeah, well, I mean, it actually went off at exactly the right time.
Yeah, and Cool Bean said, we can't lump people together, then how can we efficiently exclude? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so what I'm trying to get at is it's not just in people. Like monkeys get upset about status imbalances and injustice and unfairness with grape distribution. Like, so there's something deep in us about like, okay, we don't have what something else has, whether it's like a legit food thing or stuff that we put in as proxies for what ultimately gets us like more food, sex, comfort, safety, whatever.
Oh, right. I think I'm using the word artificial in an unclear way.
Yes.
So yeah, I do believe, yes, it's deeply, deeply biological, but I also believe or hope that, you know, us as like supposedly an evolved like biological being, we can learn to be aware of these mechanisms and overcome them.
I would say soft disagree, because like I think that it's, I mean, at least in a practical sense of like, it's much more useful to be aware, right? And so like when you are aware of something, it's on the edges of your cognition, you can adjust for it. And sometimes you adjust for it in ways that are like positive for you, sometimes in ways that are detrimental. But I think like the awareness is frankly the most important thing for me, because a lot of people, like I describe getting into Harvard Business School and like starting my first day as like I'd worn a pair of blinders on my head my entire life, that when I got in there and I started meeting these people, like I took them off for the first time and realized that I'd been losing at a game that I had no idea I was playing.
Oh, tell me more about that.
I mean, okay, so there's the concept of Harvard Business School being the golden passport, or like a golden passport, right? Like you get in and you get a whole like universe of opportunities unlocked to you, and to a degree that's true. But there's I think a more interesting thing that comes out of it, which is the idea of like the path, which I wrote about in my big old essay about going there. And the path is like happens when you're born. It's your parents understanding the hoops and jumps and hops and skips to get to a place like HBS that most people have no idea like exist, right? It's not just about going to like the right prep school. It's about doing the right extracurriculars. It's about summering in the right place. It's about meeting people that, oh, they can write letters of recommendation for you because they went there. It's knowing people already on the path that can help you find the next stop along the path to put yourself or your kids or whatever. And so like that status path, you know, for us, it's like a hidden miasma of what is this thing? But for other people, it's like very clear. Oh, if you don't, get into this thing at this spot in your life, you're off the path, at least for a little while. Isn't status just another word for power? No, I don't think so. I think it is I think it's a different concept. What do you think, Kristen?
I think it's a different concept too, and also power can be very localized. So is status, I think, but you can be very powerful. I think you can be very statusy without power, but if you're very powerful, you probably have status. Like, it goes one way.
Like they go together, but one can exist without the other for sure. I mean,
yeah, so I think I'm more interested in like how you were able to get away with having blinders for the whole time, because I assume that in military settings and whatever, literally there are these like star things that you put on your on your sleeve or something to indicate status.
Well, okay, so it's a different status game, right? Like all status is localized. Like sometimes the localization is global, but it's all like within a box. And so military status is also, it's local within the military and also within like the units that you're in, because like you could be a first lieutenant you could be in charge of a platoon, but like you're not in charge of other platoons, but you are a first lieutenant, so you still have to get saluted. Like people like non-commissioned officers and privates still have to salute you, but you don't have the same level of influence that you would if you were their platoon leader and you have like a direct bearing on them getting their next promotion. And so like, it's not that I wasn't aware of status games, right? I was like, I would argue hyper aware of them. Like I was an aide to a colonel. So like I very much needed to pay attention to like who I could influence with what soft power that I had, because I didn't have very much hard power. I had very low status, relatively speaking, in the military, but I needed to do a lot of things. But it was a private sector status game of like even dumb shit. Like I don't know wine. I still don't know wine. And so like I'd show up to an event and people would be like talking about wine. And I'm like, you clearly have had hundreds, if not thousands of glasses of wine, or you're just completely bullshitting me about this thing that you're tasting, whatever. And with those dog whistles comes like a projection of status.
Right.
They're like, hey, I have this status, you know, and you don't, because I know a thing that you don't.
Yeah. So I think that's a really clear example of like what I consider to be like artificial status, where based on taste. Like, you know, oh, I'm, you know, high status because I have the taste to differentiate between these different, like, you know, varieties of something. It's a very common thing, and I feel like, you know, I'm a, you know, coffee and tea snob. I'm not like I'm above this, but it's so obvious when people do that, and I always feel like, are people not aware that we are just, this is like a game we've made up, and that there is nothing actually more valuable, like. And I see that a lot, and it's very tricky, right? Because like, you know, on the social platforms that we're on, it's like, I know it's a game you can play. Like you can totally be like, oh yeah, I'm a blah, 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 and I know a lot about this and that. But like, to me, I've always felt really uncomfortable, like sharing this kind of thing, because I think it's very exclusionary, right?
Kristen, you're uncomfortable with weapons. That's what you're telling me, which is like, you're not
like
uncomfortable.
Social weapons.
Yeah. And so, which is funny because you're not uncomfortable with literal weapons.
Mall ninja stuff.
Like Kristen Mall Ninja over here.
Yeah, exactly.
What about social weapons makes you get what I call the
especially, you know, with like, you know, Buddhism and chaplaincy stuff, right? I feel like a responsibility to be inclusive as much as possible. And like, by definition, I think a lot of this like statusy stuff is designed to exclude a certain group. So for me, I've always felt like really uncomfortable with, you know, status games. And you can see even the way I say things, I always try to say folks and like just not exclude anybody by accident. And it's still really important to me. But I think like where I'm learning or evolving in my little evolution, where's my little antennae? My little antennae revolution. These are cable wraps.
Signals, picking up the vibrations.
Picking up signals and turning into mantis. Is like, is there a way to motivate people using status towards like causes that are more like generally good for everybody, right? And this is my example, is like I used to run a meditation community, but I think one like misstep that I made in the past was I was not exclusionary enough. I wasn't like too accessible, and I think I actually took away a gift for my customers, which is like the feeling of being special. And I feel like if I think of it as like, you know, being the gift of feeling special to someone, then I'm much more comfortable with like status manipulation. But I'm also trying to ride this fine line where I don't want to be like, you're special, but you are not special. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's some interesting serendipity going on right now. Well, first of all, I wanted to see if I could do a trick. Yes. All right, cool. No relevant to what you were saying. I just wanted to do a flip on stream before I forget. And I did. So awesome. Excluding people is a really, really tricky subject in terms of group formation, because if there is no exclusion, there is no group, because the group is everybody. And
right.
So
I feel like we actually accidentally dived into a 2025 landmine.
I mean, like I don't think it's a landmine because I've been obsessed with like group formation and how do you get different people to come together to accomplish like challenging things at the same time. I've been thinking about that for a decade plus at this point. And so like I'm very comfortable with the idea that everything can't be for everybody all the time. And each of those words carry a lot of importance in that sentence because like a group can be for everybody some of the time. It can be for a small group of people all the time. Like there's these different levers that you have to pull that the different maturity levels of a group need. And also with like certain groups and certain purposes, it has a natural like life cycle. Like the other thing that we really run into is we try to make things last forever when in fact like most of the most powerful things are only temporary. So I had the good fortune, along with all my troubles this weekend. I get to read, and I don't get to do that often, but it's a nice way to like rehab your attention span. And so I read 2 books this weekend. I read Bob Dylan's Chronicles and Tom Wolfe's The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test.
I've heard of that one. Never read it.
So, dude, I don't know what it is, but like everybody before the 90s really loved hitting on 16-year-old girls. It was just like not like.
Is that what the book is about?
No, but that it like happens. Like it was gross. But
okay.
Aside from that, like trying to pull gems from it, like with the historical context in mind, there's a lot of really interesting things that feel very true across time. So the first kind of thing, the reason why I've been thinking about this is in Bob Dylan's book, it's very clear from his early writing, and I posted about this. It's very clear from his early writing that he didn't care about things that were happening at the time that he was like starting to write music. Like it's a lot easier to not care in the 50s and 60s. I don't speed read Tutorizer. I just like locked it. He didn't care about anything except for things that happened like 100 years ago and had kind of like survived through the span of time since then. And like the origin of folk music is like truths about people.
So he was very Lindy in the beginning.
Yes, very Lindy. Like all he cared about were like these like really universal things. I don't know if things can be really universal. They're either universal or not. But the tragedy, in my opinion, of the book is like as he got older, he got much more immersed in what was happening at the time around him. Like, and you could just tell from his writing, they'd be like, "Oh, Lyndon B. Johnson said this," or "Oh, this happened right here," or "Oh, you know, like these news vignettes that were like very much like, "Oh, you know, this person just got inaugurated or whatever," and I'm like,
"Oh."
You don't see this, dude, but like your misery seems to be tied up in your re-entrenching yourself in like what was happening nearby as opposed to longitudinal.
It was like old-timey Bob Dylan discovered old-timey Twitter.
Kind of. and it like really nuked his ability to not be caught up in it all. And his later life was marked by a lot more distraction. And like
self-concept. Journal that's republished as a book. Oh, like wow.
He put this out in 2004. And that's the other thing. Like I love writing pre-internet because I think people just have a different quality to how they interact with the world. But so Bob Dylan stuff is all about this like Lindy things, whereas the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test is about pulling yourself out of other people's games in a lot of ways. Like one of the concepts that comes up a lot is everybody is playing a movie in their head of their lives. Obviously like film and stuff was coming out there. And they're like, cops have the cop movie that they play where they're the cop, you're the bad guy, they're going to catch you. You know, the businessman has the business movie where they like go and they make their money. And it's just like really interesting to me how the status attached to these different things changes how people perceive their own movies as being worthwhile or not. And then the other, like another recurring theme is like when they call themselves the pranksters, and like I don't endorse 70% of what they do throughout the journey. I think a lot of it is like pretty shitty human behavior, but like some of it's all fun to read. But they call themselves the pranksters, and when they meet somebody who has this self-image, this self-movie of how their life is supposed to be, and they clearly not just don't fit into it, they like don't care about their movie at all. They're just like living their life the way that they want to live, not playing a social interaction game, not playing cops and robbers game, whatever. It really makes other people short circuit in a way that like I don't think had been done in a lot of places before, even with stuff like protests. And so I think it's really interesting we're talking about this now, because like I made those book choices independently of what we were talking about.
Oh. And what tragedy happened to you where you ended up reading two books in the week?
Wait, what do you mean tragedy? Oh, it's cold as heck in Boston, and we were like, all right, let's do a short, like let's do a budget trip to Florida. And so that's why I was staying in like a Junko Airbnb, and so we did a get out of 10-degree weather trip.
I see. All right. And we have a Twitch viewer. I don't know what those emotes are. Can you tell? They look like Blue's Clues dog to me.
I don't know. I hope it's not like a hate symbol.
Oh, whoops. Sorry if it is, everybody. Yeah, and then Crypto Sapiens is finishing reading Slow Productivity by Cal Newport this weekend. Wow,
always a good read.
Reading. So going back to status, right? Like, do you think we could have learned something from these books you read?
Yeah, like I'm really partial to, like, I'm reflexively rebellious. I know this about myself. When I find a system, when I find a game, I immediately want to be like, double middle fingers up. I don't want to play your game. That's useful in some contexts, really harmful for myself in other contexts, and ultimately not high locus of control for me. It's because it's just a thing that I react with. But seeing those two people, or like those two groups kind of like in their own way, not play an explicit status game that was prepared for them, like it built them a lot of status in these games that they didn't like play. And so I think that there's a practical piece of like, hey, if you play a status game, ultimately what you win is that status game. And if it's not the thing that you want to win, but you're playing that game, like maybe you should reevaluate. But more importantly, like all of that status is temporary. Like even legend Bob Dylan lost the status game after a while when he kind of became a little enamored with being a legend. And so, because he got older, he became not the forefront of music. He has like a whole little vignette about how he kind of discovers 90s rap, NWA, and all those folks, do some music with him. And he's like, oh, these are the poets now. It's not me. Like my type of music is gone. Or it's like, it's not the thing that speaks the truth anymore. And so,
wow, yeah, good for him for realizing that. Unlike certain celebrities of today that are still hanging on. Not gonna name who they are.
I don't know. It's just it's made me kind of like tangibly. I don't think I'm gonna read anything newer than 20 years old anytime soon. I think it's really a good antidote for me personally, because I get really wrapped up in content status games, which is a shame because we're not that good at them yet.
Wait, what is this content status game? Like like taste of what you know? No. So in an all evil universe, in a darker timeline, I am very much a like a douchebag pitchfork music snob, like that kind of energy. Yeah, I can see that.
And so, because I was, when I was a kid, that was like a personality that I saw, and I was like, oh, I could be good at, because it's a personality that's derived from a like an input effort. It's like being able to get an A+ on a test, right? Because you can study more music than other people, and you can know this niche, you can know this subgenre. And that was really helpful to me as a kid who didn't know how to, who didn't feel like they had a place. Like, if you don't have a place, you just make a separate place so that other people can't hurt you because you're better at that place than them.
Right. And I like the fact that you use the word game, because I think that's what it is, right? It's like there are these like implicit board games that we have created and that we're susceptible to participate in society. And like to use status towards our goals would be like building your own board game and being like, okay, now here are the rules that I made up.
It's really funny you use board game.
Huh?
It's really funny you use board game and not video game to me.
I know. Well, why is that? I don't. The funny thing is, I don't even really play board games anymore. But I don't know. And that's why I imagine I'm like like, you know, making the little meeple things and you know, trying to like make rules for this game. I think it's because did you go through a phase in elementary school when you were like asked to make a board game as a project?
I feel like I've done that before, like as a project, but I don't remember it explicitly.
Yeah, so maybe that's why, because I remember actually doing that, whereas like my coding skills were never really quite good and timed enough to make a game, though I did go through my like, you know, RPG Maker phase, but I got really tired after drawing like 2 sprites, so that didn't quite work. But yeah, like and I feel like for me right now I'm embarking on this phase where I want to make some, you know, fun board/video games for people who are going through hard times, because I feel like, oh, that is the one situation where I feel like the consolation prize of status is so motivating for us to like, you know, be able to get through what we need to get through. So in this case I'm thinking about is like healthcare stuff. It's like looking after people who are sick, or like if you're feeling sick yourself, like what are the ways in which I can make that feeling feel a little bit better.
By status, do you mean like within the group or with somebody's sense of self, or like how are you thinking about that?
I think within the group and having camaraderie and like just and a sense of progress, because although of course it's like Brian Johnson type stuff where it's like your progress is your de-aging, an artificial biomarker you made up, like I feel like for a lot of especially in your late 30s that you're gonna be part of soon, like a lot of your health is mostly about like repairing decline. And I think like people haven't really gotten to that phase yet, especially if you like are into the longevity stuff. People actually tend to be younger, but as you get older, you'll be like, oh shit, I hurt my back. Like those are the ways in which you have to deal with health. And there's like no bonus points for repairing yourself. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, now I've gotten back to like status quo, and it kind of like feels like, okay, when is the next time I'm gonna hurt my back? Like it's like a lot of these like games are actually much harder to play just because you don't get brownie points for trying to like not keel over and die.
There's a lot to unpack in that. What I will say is plenty of comedians have done really good bits about going to the doctor in their 30s and the doctor being like, hey, do this, this, and this. And then they ask like, oh, okay, when do I stop? And the doctor's like, no, you just do that now.
Yeah, exactly.
that stuff is real. So another really interesting, so Tom Wolfe's whole thesis with the electric Kool-Aid acid test, which for anybody who hasn't read it, there's a group led by a guy named Ken Kesey who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is fascinating. I didn't realize that it was the same guy, who became arguably like the source of the hippie counterculture, Ashbury Height, like San Francisco movement, by basically subverting a part of Stanford while he was there, and then turning into effectively like a cult leader. You know, they painted a bus, drove all around the U.S., pulling a bunch of like what they call pranks on people, taking a lot of acid and speed and weed and smoking a lot of weed, just chaos energy. But his concept, like Tom Wolfe's thesis, is that he's a religious leader, right? Because he's doing all of these things that are effectively spawning religious movements. And he's living as the prophet of this movement. but not in a Jesus, hey, these are the rules way, but more in a like, I am like everybody has parts of the answers, but this is what I do. And he has a really useful turn of phrase, which goes back to our group discussion earlier. And he's just like, you're either on the bus or you're off the bus, referring to their bus that they drove around the country in, but they use that afterwards because the bus trip never ended. And so his marker of were you in his group or not, or like were you on the bus, were you off the bus, and there wasn't like hard rules for it, but like the idea of are you on the bus is really, really powerful for people that like frankly are looking for somewhere to be. And so what do you think like being on the bus looks like for the groups you're trying to build?
Oh, great question. And also I feel like, yeah, being a co-leader is like the ultimate status game that you've created for everybody, right? And again, even this story, I'm like, oh, it makes me feel kind of like heebie-jeebie on the inside, thinking about that way.
Everything is a game. Like no system that exists is not a game, in my opinion. And that's not derogatory. I think some games are really useful for people. I think your sense of self is derived by how you play a bunch of games in your life. But again, I also
I'm
don't
more
think
of a conundrum than a sure answer at this point, which is like the way I think about like health and like things you can do for it tends to be like not exactly the Brian Johnson extreme type of thing. And then the friends I attract who think in a similar way are the same. Like we try to be orthogonal, but we're not like completely wacky, and we're trying not to like over optimize biomarkers and things like that. It's more like practical things like now we're obsessing over like water filters right now because sadly the current administration may not be monitoring our water sources anymore. Therefore we have to be a bit more self-sovereign over our water sources.
But you're not going to let me replace all my blood with my son's?
Well, well, we're gonna replace it with cat blood. Like, what's going on? poor Rue and Remy. They're a little bit too small volume for you, I think.
I'm not gonna leech my cats.
Leech your cats.
Anansi, thanks for joining us. Is your name a reference to Anansi the spider? And also, thank you for the comment about the banger.
Yeah.
No, I know I appreciate the not crazy because like. I like the idea of like obviously I care about my health, I care about my fitness, I do all that stuff. You know, I lift, I eat garbage, but I'm trying to be better about it. I'm tracking that now. You know, but I've also like dealt with a bunch of like body dysmorphia crap. And so what do you think like the key, hey, we care about health, but we're not insane about it differences for y'all?
So if I can circle back to the water thing, like I feel like it's like little things like that where if you get the basics sorted out, I think that helps a lot more.
Can you just like have a running list of things I need to buy now because we are gutting the EPA or whatever? Because I would like, Kristen, I trust you enough that I would just spend $40 on filter X or whatever. Obviously would love for you to get an affiliate cut, but
oh yeah, like I'm freaking out the whole supply chain because my brother has access to this kind of stuff. So I'm actually trying to figure out like where to source these water filters and to make it really nice for everybody to use. Nice. But sort of like, you know, but here's the thing, right? Like I think as we obsess down these like, you know, health things and track them down, a lot of times I realize it's paperwork. Like that is the biggest barrier for health access for most of us, especially in the US. And I think that is I always joke, it's like there's the saints equivalent in Buddhism called bodhisattvas. And it's like the bodhisattva of paperwork is the unsung hero because it's like that is the hardest bureaucratic layer that we need to break through. And there's absolutely no status in trying to figure this out. So to me, I'm trying to like make this painful process less painful because especially for like founder types like you did not become who you are because you love paperwork. So
no. But there is a funny like, parallel.
Oh, what is it?
In startup land, it's called the schlep. Like
schlep. Yeah,
most startups live in the schlep. And Anansi, I love that that's the spider trickster reference. I love that. But okay, cool. That's awesome. I'm glad to know that I can spend money that hopefully benefits you soon.
So yeah, and then Tudor Rice said fundamentals. Exactly. So for example, even like working out, right? This is something I'm trying to solve with my friends. And lately the solution has been my freaking Apple Fitness watch situation. Yep. But it's so motivating to like kick my friend and lose his ass by closing the rings and reporting it back and throwing it in his face. So I feel like it's rarely about like, you know, oh, you must work out in a certain way. It's like, what is the stupid status game you can figure out that keeps you doing the workout every day or whatever, so that
or at least like what's level 0
of health?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the way that I think about it is, so I'm I gotta get this camera fixed. I just love seeing how annoyed you get with it. So I'm pretty good with like lifting weights. It's something that I really enjoy. I've been doing it for 15 years when my back isn't destroyed. But I hate running. I hate cardio in general. I hate kind of just like, it has like really negative associations with me. Because of like, I had to do it by force with the Army for so long, and I got short little legs, and so it's painful for me. But I'm getting to the point where you ever see this the thread on Reddit where, or a comment, or it might have been a tweet where someone's like, most people never sprint again after the age of 30.
Oh, I've not heard that one, but I believe it.
Yeah, like when you get to the point of like, oh, when's the last time I ran at a full clip, and you're like, oh, it's been a minute. Like that's also not a good thing for our machine, like our meat machines that need to do stuff. And so, but I'm trying to think about like, what's the level 0 for me of that? Straight up, it's like playing 20 minutes of like a Dance Revolution type game.
Ooh. I did not expect that answer. I was thinking, oh, is it pick up basketball?
I don't have friends, so I can't play a pick up game with people. But also, I've done that. I've done like some drills and stuff. But yeah, so like the level 0 is, it's like another way to say what you're saying is like, okay, what's the minimum thing that gets you to do the motions of it? And then once you get used to that, then you can kind of clip up the intensity or the complexity or whatever.
Right. That is true. And, you know, let's talk about the MetaQuest 2 or 3 that, you know, that I think you have and what we can do with that. Because there are some like Dance Revolution type games on there.
Oh, no way I'm streaming those. Not anytime
soon. Here's the thing, like, because, you know, you and I have talked about the back issue stuff. And this is true of, you know, myself and of my friends as well. It's 50% solving the problem and 50% entanglement in what it means to feel this way and how like, oh, I feel sick in this way. Therefore, now I'm doubting everything because now I'm afraid that this will happen forever. And this is just my life now. And I feel like there's also that like untangling that I could potentially help with. You know, that's the challenge.
The catastrophizing about something and
or the acknowledgement, like, because it is true, like, you know, but when you're you know born, you die, like that's what it is. And I think like our first major like health setback, especially, you know, when we're like, you know, our 20s and 30s, like that is the hard part that I think is not very statusy, because like no one wants to talk about that.
I mean, it's the same energy. So it's like, it's the moment you realize you're mortal.
Yeah, exactly.
But it also has the same energy as like, I don't know if this is the same for you, but like there's a concept kind of, I guess, in like between like the male community or men of like the first time you see your dad like fall down or falter in some like real meaningful way, you're like, oh, he's not a god, he's just a guy. Like that kind of like, oh no moment is really powerful.
Exactly. So I feel like these are the things where like we all experience it, right? Like I'm sure, you know, we all talk about it to each other as friends, but as a society, especially in America, like we do not talk about these things. we shove sick people away in the hospital.
Hell yeah. And make them pay for it too.
Right. And then I've loved these, like, you know, myself, my friends, it's like you're often also in this like sandwich generation where you have access to like a lot of knowledge and a lot of like, you know, things that you could potentially tweak to help older people. But, You know, it's a really painful job, and you know, I've interacted with older people. You know, it is like super painful. So I think like these are the ways in which I'm like, oh, you know, if we have a little bit of status to sweeten the process, then I'm okay with it, because I'm like, okay, this is like status as care, and not like status to be like bougie and to you know, be exclusive.
Interesting. You wanna hit on
I feel like we have a lot of sprinters in our chat.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I like the idea of sprinting much more than the realities of it.
Yeah, and Sam, this is why you are such a great entrepreneur, because you love the parts that most people hate.
Yeah, a lot of founders just need to shut up and color, and that's not very fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's no status in shutting up and coloring, not for years.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about status being a time limited thing, because I think that's always been my struggle as well, of like trying to invent a board game that can last forever. Turns out, don't try to do that. And just being more upfront about like, okay, this is a sprint that we're gonna do together.
Yeah, I mean, again, from the Tom Wolfe is an amazing writer. Like I got opinions about him.
I've only read The Right Stuff.
Like he has a very, and again, maybe this is a dude thing, but he has a very visceral way of describing like actions and in medias res type scenarios that you're like that, or at least for me, I'm like, oh, like this feels very now. But he has kind of another refrain in the book, art is temporary, which is what the pranksters kind of told themselves. Like they had this like beautiful bus, that I mean, like kind of beautiful, mostly insane and acid fueled, but then they painted over it to do something else. And so they could have taken it and put it in a museum, but they're like, no, we're living in this perpetual now. We're like not living in the future because that's ego. We're not living in the past because that's ego. Like this moment is the thing that we're trying to experience. And the more we can live, Tom Wolfe calls it like a kairos. The more you can live this experiential thing without getting distracted by all of these movies that people have in their heads, like the better off you are. Status as a temporary thing for me is really, really powerful as a guy whose instinct is to try and save a lot of things. You know, maybe that's like me, you know, punching against the ocean or whatever. But the idea that knowing that no matter what you're going to be doing, like it has to go away eventually, and like you want to save it for a certain amount of time because like practical, and that's how you actually accrue resources and status to get the things that you want, but not being worried about the like it living in perpetuity, and because that's very limiting, has been like a powerful thing to think about for me for the past 48 hours.
Past 48 hours. So how are you not worrying about accumulating? I did notice that change in you, actually. You seem to have shifted in that way.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been trying to write it out because I'm still like discovering myself, and I think I'm gonna discover myself for the rest of my life, which is frankly a gift that I didn't have the wherewithal to consciously notice until maybe a couple years ago. But I love trying on lives for size. Like when I read a book, I'm trying on somebody's life for a little while, and so. Like I think of myself as, you know, the protagonist because I like to do that, and I'll act in a way that is consistent with that protagonist character for an amount of time. It doesn't mean I'm like, oh, I'm Bob Dylan for the next 3 months. It's like, okay, as I go about my day, like there's bits and pieces of this thing that I want to see if it feels right for me, and whether I do it for like a day or a month or a year or whatever, I feel like I get a lot of value out of like experimenting and giving myself permission to like act a little bit more in this way or that way. And so the thing that I'm getting out of it now is like oh no, I really like I have this magic rectangle in my pocket, but it also gives me a poison condition anytime I use it. And it's like Like for real.
No, a debuff.
Yeah, I anytime I pull out my magic rectangle, I get a debuff because there's like this, oh, I am not as far as this person, or oh, I'm not as funny as that person. And like all of it is like a dumbass status thing that you and I both know that other person has been playing this game either longer, or they started from like a better starting position, or they had somebody else to kind of like shape them, or maybe they just are better at it than you and they're always going to be better at it than you. And it detracts from your ability to be the best at the thing that you can be best at, which is like whatever the fuck you care about. Because nobody's going to care about the things you care about in the same order, context, and like with the same experiences as you, because I can't. And so I'm trying to lean more into the things that like I genuinely, authentically, non-influentially do, as opposed to chasing a thing.
I love that. It's like breaking through status quo.
Yeah.
For like, ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's like my being on the bus for me, right? Because like I don't want to be on somebody else's bus. I'm kind of torn about like what bus I want to drive.
Are we in the same bus?
I think we are. Okay, but so the other piece about being on the bus, in the way that like the Merry Pranksters talked about it, is it's not like you're worried about excluding people. You need to exclude people, or else groups have no fundamental meaning. The nuance is anybody can get on the bus. But it's like their choice whether to get on the bus. And so like the idea being that everybody has the potential within them to decide to get on the bus, and you'll do what you can to wake people up to the opportunity that is the bus, you know, and like that's it for me. Is like, hey, there's a list of things that I kind of like believe in. There's a list of things that I do, and I try to like live those out in, you know, how I make content, how I like spend my time and day. And if that vibes like if you vibe with that, like get on the bus, dude. Like we'll figure it out. But if that doesn't vibe with you, cool, you're not on the bus.
And speaking of like, you know, other people's lives, you know, Lex Friedman has been posting emo stuff lately.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah, like he's been saying stuff like, oh, I'm still back at the, you know, standing in front of a 7-Eleven listening to music and trying to figure my life out. Like, I mean, like, I don't know what is performative emo posting, but I was just like, huh, that's interesting. That's if he is trying to like switch up his persona, I was like, oh, that's an interesting direction to go.
I mean, it's tough. I'm sure he feels bad that Putin didn't want to talk to him anymore. Which I have less sympathy for, but it's also really tough because his audience base is, you'll really like this moment. So more than anything else in Bob Dylan's book, this little vignette hit me hard. He was like 17 years old. He moved to the big city, which is like Duluth, you know, North Dakota.
Wow. That's where Maria Bamford's from.
Oh, I mean, there's something in the water out there. But so he goes and he kind of like plays in coffee shops, plays his folk music. He makes friends with this guy, who is the archetypical, like exactly who you thought of when I said pitchfork music snob guy. He's that guy for folk music in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
Like nobody today can make true folk music. All the true folk music was written 40 years ago. And I'm like, if that guy fucking existed in the 60s, what else is just the same thing? You know what I mean? So I read that and I haven't stopped thinking about what else am I seeing today, which is another iteration. Is it
our like responsibility to be that guy?
No.
Like, so
screw that guy.
But in a way, he's trying to build a game of folk music and being like, you know, this is his bus.
Like, so he's not doing anything but guarding his bus. Like his bus isn't a, hey, let's figure out how to make this thing better. It's a, you can't make this better, so you should stop trying bus.
Okay. So like, it's a discouraging energy.
I mean, inherent in it is a value judgment about how some people live their lives, and I think you and I disagree about that. I think people can spend their entire life in pursuit of things that are like worthless. I think that they can. I mean, I guess maybe you believe that too. Like,
I feel like I'm trying not to be judgmental.
I am fully judgmental. But oh no, this is the fundamental difference. I think that nothing inherently matters, so you have to like craft a value system that makes sense for you in the context of the world. In my value system, I think you do have to make decisions about the kinds of behaviors that you spend your time doing. And in that, you have to have the conviction to be able to say, like, hey, this is a better behavior than the other.
And it becomes like bus inception, right? Like,
yeah, of course it does. I mean, no groups matter unless there's exclusion in there. So I think like it's all a continuum. Obviously, you know, my continuum is definitely much more open. But it's the same problem of tolerating intolerance. You get what I mean when I say that? Like,
yeah.
Like some opinions, some belief structures are inherently more mimetic. Intolerant belief structures are very mimetic because they suppress actively other systems so that they can take their space. And so if you are tolerant of specific kinds of intolerance, you are sacrificing other things so that that thing has space. And I don't think that's the right call.
So here's the thing, right? This kind of bleeds into having takes. So sure. Recently, you know, our friend Keckers posted something from Derek Sievers where he's like, "Oh, it's your job to be as rich and famous and as many takes as possible." And yeah. I realized I'm pretty weak on takes because I'm trying not to be exclusionary. Yeah. And also I caveat what I say because I don't think it applies to everyone. But now I feel like, I think in order to grow as a person, I need to be more take-y. And that kind of bleeds into the whole Pitchfork's music snob situation where they are good at takes. And in order to have a take, you have to say something really decisively, which then, you know, draws the line of the bus on what's on the bus and what's not on the bus, but in a way where I'm like, I have not done this before.
Yeah. But there's the temporal element in there too. And you do have takes. You have takes about health. Like the take isn't, hey, replace your blood with younger blood.
Yeah, it's not as clear as like replace your blood with blood of your son. You know what I mean? Like it's very definitive prescriptive takes. Whereas I'm trying to be prescriptive about being non-prescriptive, which is something a little bit more harder to dial in. I'm sure I'll get it over time, but that's why my messaging is still like, I'm testing, hey, everybody, hello. But like, I'm trying to refine it into a more concise take as I'm building the bus.
I mean, like, I think we can all be better word cells because like the word cells really do craft narratives.
Yeah.
I think... Well, one, there's like an irony of Derek Sievers of nobody outside of like tech blogosphere knowing who he is. So like, if you really believe that, he'd probably try harder to, you know, run like an evil company or something. So I take that with a grain of salt. But I think if you think that you have something to add to the conversation, I'm not going to say it's like a moral imperative to say it because I like that is not how I feel. But I do think there is a sense of accepting your humanity and being potentially wrong that you can have, that for some people are too unnuanced, dare I say, stupid to understand that you can say something and then update it later. Like some people just that they don't understand how that works because they don't think about things, they feel things, and they take their feelings as reality because that's just how they've lived their entire lives. There's actually a lot of people that do that, which terrifies me, but you know, it is what it is. Right. Actually, I'll go out and say, like, I think a lot of boomers do that. I think that they felt a certain thing about the world, and that's just how they perceive it because they've never had any interest in perceiving something else to be true and accepting that they could be wrong about something.
Yeah, but, and so theorize, my take is I don't think there's any such a thing as fact, even though I, you know, was a scientist. like, maybe that's a hot take because I've seen how facts are made, and facts are made in an opinion factory. Like, even though, like, you know, things have scientific evidence supporting it, like clearly we thought the earth was flat, like, you know what I mean? Like everything, like in that It's Always Sunny bit, everything is evolving.
So Krista, I think this is why Actually, no. I'm gonna save that. I broadly agree with you. Specifically, want you to answer
I feel
the
like
question.
you were gonna say something way more spicy, and you self-censored. So
I'm gonna wait till you say something else. Would you also agree that there are many scenarios where you can perform an action 100 times and expect roughly the same outcome, like 99 out of 100 of those times?
Yes, and I think that's where.
Okay. So you're
that's
fine.
true.
Like that's a perfectly reasonable thing. It's like saying,
but
"Hey,
the reasoning as to why that happens is the opinion, and that's where it's blended together as a package when you see
but
science.
you're stopping at the like info hazard, like frankly, like dumb part of the internet thing where you're like, oh, nothing's actually true. So, but there are degrees of things that are repeatable and consistent, right?
Correct.
Like,
but that line is not
equation,
drawn where I think most people draw it.
then say that. Don't just say, "Oh, I don't believe in facts," because like then the dumb people will be like, "Oh, this."
That's what you heard. That's not actually what I said. If you replay it, but you already heard what you think I said.
Yeah, maybe I'm one of the dumb people.
Nuance and a difficult thing on the internet.
Yeah, and that's why I think you got to be more takey.
Yes, I'm learning from takey people that we both see on the internet.
I mean, people with bad takes are extremely takey. You know what I mean?
And I think, it's like this like fear of being misunderstood, maybe, of like, because I mean, you and I both debate certain people's takes that we see, and we're like, oh God, that's a terrible take. Like, I think that, but the thing is, I'm sure we have a conversation with that person. There's a lot more nuance to it, but they're really good at making it really like concise, like like adapted to the modern day attention span, and that would mean that what they say is not that precise, and that always makes me feel like I'm trying to deliver information and not necessarily an opinion.
So I'll throw this out. I agree with that, and ultimately the only person you like really need to answer to is like how you feel about yourself, right? I think it is really, really hard to get to the point where enough people have listened to what you said to have a good conversation about it without having a statement that has some like wiggle room in it. Like, like I've dunked on Johnson for replacing the blood, but like arguably it has done something positive for him. I think it's like too far on the continuum of like that's an insane thing to do.
He admits it hasn't.
Oh, it hasn't? Okay, well,
so
insert another thing about drinking urine.
It didn't really help that much for like his son's blood to him. It helped a lot more for his dad. Like his blood to his dad helped a lot more.
Okay, so like an insane thing helped him in some way, right? Or helped his dad in some way.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, it's not that insane. Like parapheresis, like the replacement of blood, that's a series of known experiments where you like link up the blood systems of like an old mouse and a young mouse. It does work. Like, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of nuances that are missed because it turned into Brian Johnson, haha, it's a vampire. But what he's doing is not that unscientific. And there is like a thing where as scientists, we know there is something in the bloodstream that's an aging factor, but we haven't identified it. So it's easier to just like clear it all out.
So okay. So for a normal person, not a scientist, replacing blood is insane. Like and just because it's not unreasonable in the scientific community doesn't mean I don't think it's an insane thing for a normal person to hear.
But like when you are donating your blood and plasma, in a way you're doing that.
Sure. But like, why like, this is interesting because this is a microcosm of a bigger thing of like, why are you trying to convince me that this isn't insane? Like, why does it bother you that I think it's insane?
Oh, it doesn't bother me, but I in fact, I'm trying to explore. It's like your gut reaction is like, this is crazy. But when I'm presenting it with, oh, there's like nuances to what he's doing. But like, it's not the reason why he is statusy and famous, because he made it really concise and like a soundbite, right? He's literally an active troll on purpose because it works.
I mean, because he knows it sounds insane.
Right. It grabs your attention, but it's sort of like the means to an end situation, which is similar to this whole status conversation. Is like, if he's trolling you in order for you to maybe be interested in his stuff, and maybe some of his stuff is scientific, which, by the way, I don't think all of his stuff is scientific, right? Like he has a lot of, like, the way he tests things, he doesn't actually show you the full set of data. There's a lot of things I don't agree with the way he's presenting it at this point, but presenting status and exclusionary thing while also having shades of gray is very tricky.
I don't think it's tricky in so much as it is impossible. I don't think that we get even one order of magnitude more people paying attention to us without a bunch of those people not understanding what we do or misunderstanding something that we say. Like, I think
I think the Brian Johnson scenario, it's like he has gained so much status that people don't question his approach as much as they used to. Even in the comment section, you can see people actually he's working. Like, people are getting converted, right, including me. But like, it's really important to maintain that agency to be like, wait, but like there's a lot of little things that he does that's like lumped into his whole philosophy that aren't really as high caliber of evidence as some of his experiments.
And that bothers you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I love this stuff, so it's fine. But then I feel like it bothers you.
Brian Johnson stuff doesn't bother me because it's not my like wheelhouse, right? Like I don't know. I kind of not an anti-vaxxer. I get my vaccinations. I do the basics. You know, I've gotten a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have injected in my body in the army.
I was gonna say, in the military, you didn't have a choice.
Yeah, but like it's not close to me. Like there's been some other things that we've talked about. Like, we won't name names, but there's like some like AI stuff that I haven't been a big fan of. But I think honestly, the root of a lot of my objection with how some other people are going across the internet is like, either they're being intentionally disingenuous in a specific way that I don't really like, or I'm just straight up envious about their success doing like, and combining the two is where I get really frustrated. Again, that's kind of playing somebody else's status game, so I'm trying to, ascend past that. Like, I don't know. That like
I feel like it's a positioning problem for me, like, practically speaking. Like, because I've been like trying to test my messaging to be like, oh, it's like Brian Johnson stuff, but less wacky. But that's not really great, actually. To position against someone else.
Brian Johnson, but more boring is a bad way.
Exactly, it comes across that way. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. But like, because he's done such a good job, like being the mascot of health optimization stuff, like, it is a bit tricky, right? Because, well, like, again, it's a mixed bag of things that he's presenting, and there's some stuff that's good, and there's some stuff with less evidence. But it, nuance again. It's not a thing we still have.
So should we be chasing status?
I think we should be aware of status and to design our own status games as much as possible. So therefore we have agency over status.
So don't play a game, just create systems that your meat robot will react to.
Something like that. What do you think? Games sounds more fun than systems.
Yeah. Definitely for the clip. I think ultimately there's like an axis of what you consciously like want to do, and then there's like the why that's underpinning your logic of how you think you get to that spot. And I think the underlying why is really like fulfillment. And it was just really abstract and hard to define.
So what I'm trying to say is that none of this is fulfilling.
Doing things, do you not get fulfilled when you do anything?
I think I trick myself into thinking they're fulfilling, but most things are not that fulfilling. And
but some things are. like my real question is there anything you can possibly do that creates a sense of like true authentic fulfillment? Do you believe? Like this is just your
Yes, I do believe in that.
Okay.
But I think a lot of things I do are it's for me, I feel like it's been much better for my mental state to not mix up what I need to do to, be alive and all of that and to serve others versus fulfillment. Like you would think that those are related, but now I'm like, oh, they're not related.
Wait, and that's say that again. Like your service of others wasn't fulfilling to you.
No, they're not. Yeah, and I feel like it's a very subtle point, and that's why it was a black hole. It's like I need to like self-generate that sense of fulfillment that's not even dependent on serving others, which I think is like a lot of the helpful, nice people trap.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's actually very subtle people pleasing that I was doing it this whole time. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think, and the whole perception situation is what I'm trying to say. Is like we keep thinking that oh yes, we've surely risen above status games, but I think most of us have not risen above status games. We've just like exited one loop. Pardon?
We've changed them. We've changed them from like like a big corpo status loop to a niche sub-community status game.
Exactly. And like, a lot of the drives to success and all sorts of things are all like various types of status games. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So a nuance of the book is that a lot of the people in the Ken Kesey cult like weren't out of the status game. They were just playing the like prankster status game within the group, and they wanted attention from like the cult leader, which is like a really big point that I think a lot of people who love romanticizing LSD culture really miss. For me, status can be extremely useful as a tool. I certainly, keep my HBS stuff in my pocket for when I need it, because there's a certain type of business interaction that like I have where when that comes up in my background, I see it hits, and then like, oh, I can maybe like have a more productive conversation as a result of them knowing that. But I was an emo kid in high school. I played the emo kid status game, not very well. There was like a bigger tier of it that was like with the Atlanta hardcore music scene that I like never really, was good at. In the military, I realized I wasn't going to be very good at the Army status game because it just like didn't fit with me. And certainly the HBS status game, I would never succeed at. And the Farcaster status game, I also like haven't really succeeded at either. And so it's like an interesting spot of I want to leverage pieces of status where it's like beneficial, but I really just want to only give a shit about the people's opinions who are also on my bus. Like everybody else fundamentally doesn't get it. And if you don't get it, that's fine. I'm happy to talk about it. But like there's very much oh, I can tell you're wearing a lizard skin suit or not with a lot of people that I meet. And, if that's how they want to live, great. But for me, it's like the status game part at its very most valuable is just a tool to pursue the other things, I think.
Mm-hmm. So how important is it to understand other people's status games? I think that's the part where I'm like, the lizard suit situation comes in. Oh, skin suit, not lizard suit. Skin suit worn by a lizard person. A situation comes in because in order to, I think, get people onto your bus, you kind of have to understand, oh, they're already on the other bus because we're on some bus. And then so that you can entice them to come along to your bus. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's the growth edge for me of like, oh, you're into this. I see. But it's like I have to like appeal to that aspect. You know what I mean? And that would mean I will have to put on a little bit of a skin suit situation myself.
Well, it depends on how social engineering you feel comfortable with. So Tutorizer's question I think is really interesting. How would it look if somebody plays absolutely no status games? I don't think we've ever seen a person that did that for their entirety of their lives.
Yeah.
But it probably looks something, I don't know, maybe like something closer to like a Henry Rollins. Are you a Henry Rollins fan?
What is Henry Rollins?
Oh, that's a rabbit hole. headed up Black Flag punk band, and basically just has done projects he's liked for the past 40 years. Perpetual Bachelor, very much General Mattis energy, actually, except just in his domain. But anyway, Henry Rollins, fascinating character, just like doesn't give a fuck. He'll give a like a extemporaneous like poetry kind of like show presentation and then disappear for a year, like that kind of energy. Willem Dafoe also is kind of like that. Willem Dafoe energy. Yeah, Tudorizer. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. Tequila Guru. I'm curious what you meant by agreeing with Kristen.
I like that.
I mean, of course. But so Kristen, I think like the answer of I care a lot about context, people's contexts, because I've spent most of my life kind of in a state of confusion about why people do the things that they do. And so whenever I meet somebody, and this maybe goes back to the judgmental thing that we've talked about.
It goes back to the whole like other people's bus thing that I talk about. I think I suffer from the same problem.
But the difference here is like it's a problem of awareness and analysis, not a problem of acceptance. Like I'm very aware of other people's like hangups, their status games, whatever. Like I could meet somebody at HBS and I could tell how quickly they like stopped caring about me if I did like when they realized I couldn't help them get their next job or whatever. And so like,
yeah,
I think it's really, really important to like understand that. I think you need to be able to understand somebody else's game and also think that the decisions they've made about the architecture of their lives are just if you're being rude about it, like I am, like it's just a complete waste of time and energy that's probably going to leave them unfulfilled. Or if you're being a little bit more generous, it's not going to serve you in the way that it might serve them. And so what I do is like, I meet someone, I'm like, oh, I think you're probably motivated by this, this, and this. And then I operate under that set of assumptions. And then as I get more data, I adjust that set of assumptions. And then I don't let that affect, or I try not to let that affect like my compass. Cause like my compass is hard won from a lot of different battles. And like when I start letting somebody else's compass define mine unconsciously, that's usually when I get like really freaking miserable. Which is funny because I just said I read books to try on somebody else's life for a little while. But like the point is I'm doing that on purpose.
Yeah. I love that. All right, let's read more and try on other people's buses.
Read old books. Get on the bus. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. Maybe one day we'll have an OK Banger bus.
Kill
that sounds
status.
really bad.
Nope, not going to do that.